code red. I'm talking about an elementary and secondary education system which is in full catastrophic collapse.
If you give your attention to the certain students who are struggling, I'm failing somebody else right now.
19% of graduates can't read.
It's a scandal. It's not acceptable.
Billions of dollars are being spent to educate kids that aren't getting educated.
We have a system that's dysfunctional to borderlines under corrupt.
This is a national emergency. Well, America, today I am delivering a code red. You know me, and you know I am not one to yell fire in a crowded theater. You're about to learn the truth about a genuine, ongoing national emergency. I believe the single greatest threat to the American way of life and our standing on the world stage. You will likely think, why is no one else shouting about this from the rooftops? In fact, why is anyone talking about anything else? I'm talking about America's public education system. If you were expecting something more dramatic like spies in our midst, hang on to your hat. I'm talking about an elementary and secondary education system which is in full catastrophic collapse. Not coming soon, right now. Once the envy of the world, our schools are failing at every level. Now, you're out of school, so why should you care? You should care because it's the root cause of homelessness, crime, incarceration, drug addiction, poverty, and family disintegration. The empirical evidence is very clear. I'm stating absolute fact, yet no one, not even our leaders, is seriously addressing the silent rot that's eating away at the very foundation of our country. Let this sink in. The United States, once the leader across the board, now ranks 36th in literacy globally. That means 35 countries rank above us. Why should you care if others can't read? Well, consider this. 70% of prison inmates cannot read above a 4th grade level. 85% of juveniles in the court system are illiterate. 43% of adults with the lowest levels of literacy live in poverty. 75% of welfare recipients struggle with even basic literacy. Our education system is imploding right now. It's getting worse, not better. 1 in 4 children can't read at even the basic level. Math scores have plummeted to historic lows. Almost 320,000 teaching positions sit vacant or are filled with uncertified teachers, with just 12% of all teachers saying they're satisfied with their jobs and almost half planning to quit soon. And if all that isn't enough, in Arizona, they've had to recruit parents to babysit teacherless classrooms. All of this adds up to an entire generation of American children left behind, while nations like Singapore and China surge ahead. And here's the most infuriating part. We're spending nearly $20,000 per student annually, more than almost any other nation. Yet we're watching our children's future, America's future, slip away. A nation that fails to educate its citizens cannot thrive, cannot lead, and will not endure. And hear me, this problem is not with the teachers themselves. Teachers, by and large, are dedicated and caring men and women who certainly are not in it for the money. So what is the problem? Well, tonight, we're not just exposing a crisis. I believe we're confronting the very issue that will determine whether America rises or falls. The clock isn't ticking, it's running out. And our leaders on this are in a race to the bottom. I intend this to be a wake-up call. Now, Samantha was a teacher, something she says ran in her blood, but today she says she will never step foot in a classroom again.
I always wanted to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher, my grandma, my uncle, but I will never go back. I don't ever want to be a teacher again. I started teaching in 2016. I was ecstatic to get my own classroom. The second year and third year, I felt like I wasn't able to support all of my students. I would get students who would come to me in first grade who didn't know their letters, who didn't know their numbers. I felt leaving deflated every single day. Like, did anything get accomplished? Did anybody learn anything? And I truly believe that there are very few people who are making decisions right now with the children first. So then fourth year was COVID. And that's when it all, I would say, just went so south. I was at my all-time low, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I needed anything to get me feeling good. So I started sharing my workouts online, and that was when my principal called me in, and she was like, I just wanted you to see this. It was an email that a parent had sent that stated my social media was inappropriate. The principal told me that it was serious enough, since it was put in writing, she had to go to HR. HR put a formal letter together, and then there was a letter in my file that said, due to inappropriate activity. The thought of having something in your file that says due to inappropriate activity, I could barely get myself out of bed. So I quit teaching. I would get into my car every day and fight back tears. I can remember sitting in my car feeling like I failed the students, just feeling like I failed.
How does it make you feel knowing that you'll never teach children again? Because that was something you really wanted.
It's all I ever wanted, to be a teacher. It's like there was no plan B. The thought to know that I'll never step foot in a classroom again is the most freeing feeling in the whole world. Although teaching is my passion, it runs in my blood. I love the students. I will miss them, I miss the relationships, but knowing I don't have to be in the classroom, it's like 1,000,000 pounds off my chest.
Because you say the environment was toxic. What made it so toxic?
The toxicity came from unrealistic expectations that teachers are supposed to be there an hour and a half before contract hours. We're supposed to get it all done. And the toxicity of just truly having to do everything. And if you didn't complete it, it's as if you failed.
I said we are in a national emergency. Do you agree with that?
I do. I use my social media to help teachers feel good in their skin. I talk to teachers all day, every day for the last 2 years, and I have never spoken to a happy teacher. They all went out. They all feel stuck. We're just not happy.
Well, someone with the same education that you have in any other profession makes about 25% more than teachers make. We're not paying teachers enough. Teachers are now asked to do things that you shouldn't be asked to do. And it seems to me that what's happening across the board nationally is we're lowering standards to keep kids progressing to the next grade. So you're getting children into your grade that weren't prepared in the grade before for a myriad of reasons. How do you keep them up?
I think this is the hardest part, right? As teachers, first of all, we don't go into education for the money. We all know teachers are underpaid, right? Like, I never went into teaching for the money. And quite honestly, I don't even feel like that's the issue. Yes, of course, it would be lovely to get paid more, and we need more respect for our teachers and more resources. But at the end of the day, it's the unrealistic expectations that we are doing more than just meeting students' academic needs. I was teaching first grade at the time, and I was being expected to teach these kids who had no letter recognition. They were supposed to be fluent readers by the end of first grade. I mean, there's just no time in the day, right? So you feel like if you give your attention to the certain students who are struggling, then maybe those kiddos who are on grade level or maybe a little above aren't getting what they need. So whether you're giving your attention to who you feel is best at that moment, you also in the back of your head know, I'm failing somebody else right now. Like, I just don't have enough time to meet everybody's needs.
When the pandemic hit, it exposed what was really happening at their children's school. These parents we're about to meet were so shocked that they decided to take drastic action. We're going to find out what it was after the break. If you're worried about IRS collection tactics, you don't have to face them alone. Tax Network USA is here to help. Tax Network USA is the nation's premier tax relief firm and has negotiated over $1 billion in tax relief for clients. Our services include penalty forgiveness, hardship programs where you might not have to repay anything until your tax debt expires, and offer in compromise solutions for lump sum settlements. Whether you owe $10,000, 1 or 10 million, our experts are ready to assist you. Even if you're behind on taxes due to missing personal or business records, Tax Network USA can guide you through the process. Tax season is long over, and for the IRS, that means it's collection season. To schedule complimentary consultation, call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil. Don't let the IRS's aggressive tactics control your life. Take charge of your financial future. Visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil today.
I think a lot more grace needs to be given to teachers. I think right now the things that teachers are being expected to do rather than focusing on students' academic needs are just checking boxes and being little robots and being an assembly line. They're not able to be fully present. We just feel like by Friday, don't look at me, don't talk to me, don't touch me, don't need me. You know, the thing that I feel most compelled to share is that if things don't change, we will have no teachers.
The pandemic proved to be one of the biggest disasters ever for students, particularly those in public schools. Mark and Val's children were no exception, but instead of hindering their learning, it actually led to shocking but eye-opening truths and led to a new life for all of them.
When my son was in school, he was struggling, and towards the end of the pandemic, we were seeing that he was not doing well at all, and he was falling behind.
The pandemic happened, and they basically sent all the kids home with tablets. And in essence, we were basically homeschooling the kids ourselves. So you're sitting there watching what these teachers are doing, and the kids don't actually learn anything. Our daughter was not being challenged. Our son was way behind, and nobody seemed to be figuring out what to do.
The school system definitely wants a one-size-fits-all for all kids, and that's not how, every child is learning at their own pace. When we had to homeschool our kids, at first it was temporary, and then we thought, oh man, this is so awesome. We are seeing our kids thrive and we are loving it. We're able to travel around America and see all these national monuments, go to museums. And it was just something that sparked our interest that we don't want to give this up and we want to continue doing this.
You got some shocks in this situation. Nobody told you, for example, that your son was not reading to his grade level, right?
Correct.
How'd the light bulbs start coming on?
I would say during the pandemic, we really started to see what was happening. And our son was falling really behind. He wasn't reading, he wasn't writing well. And so that was truly eye-opening. We were sent home with tablets. As parents, we had to sit there and basically teach our kids ourselves. And we saw the downfalls of where our son was.
And what grade?
At that particular time?
Second grade.
And you say he was behind in math and reading both, right?
Yes. We knew he was a special kid, so...
He can't learn from memorization, he can't sit behind a book, sit behind a screen. He's very, very hands-on, and that's what it seemed like he was never getting, and we only found out about that later on.
Did you find parents that didn't know where their kids were in terms of performance?
Absolutely. I think sometimes as teachers, we have those kids who we call bubble kiddos who aren't having gnarly behaviors in the classroom. They're not taking all of our attention. And it's sometimes hard to catch those kids because all of our attention is going to the kids who know nothing or a danger to others or themselves. So it's kids like your son who, as teachers, we feel like we're failing the most because our attention is going elsewhere.
There are 50 million kids in public school system. Think about this multiplied across so many millions of kids across the country. Do you think this is an emergency situation?
Absolutely.
Beyond measure, for sure.
30% of fourth graders, 30% of eighth graders cannot read at the most basic level. We're not even talking about math or science, we're just talking about reading. It's been said that in first, second, and third grade, you learn to read. From there on, you read to learn. So you spend the first 3 years learning, getting this tool, and then from there on, you use that tool to learn. So if you don't get it in those first 3 years, then you don't have that tool to gather knowledge with from that point on. And so you just start falling further behind and getting frustrated. And that's when they start acting out. That's why 85% of kids in the court system, in the juvenile centers, are barely literate. They got frustrated by the system, and so they pushed it away and started getting in trouble.
I mean, there were days I would get in my car and I was just glad everybody went home safe. Like, it just shifted from genuinely teaching the students academics to feeling like you're putting out fires all day long, whether it's redirecting a behavior, whether it's a parent email that has absolutely nothing to do with academics. They're asking you unrealistic expectations.
How did it change self-esteem-wise and pride-wise once you started helping and doing what you did to fill that gap?
Well, at first, it was definitely a big challenge, and it does affect your self-esteem. After we found out what the issues were, we decided to, change a few things and use our resources at best. And it honestly made our kids feel so much more confident and freeing, and just, it felt so nice for them to finally feel like they're on track.
And what do you call what you're doing?
We call it world schooling. It's like homeschooling, but instead we're actually going to these places. We try to cover the basics, math, reading, writing. Those are the things that we definitely want to make sure that they're challenged completely on. But when it comes to social studies, history, science, we travel to destinations. For almost 4 years now, we go to wherever we're supposed to read about. And internationally, we're going to really like hot button areas where you had in Hawaii, where you had Pearl Harbor, you had Japan, you had where the South Korean War happened. We're going to these different areas to actually explore and learn about them.
Do you have any idea what that's costing a year?
Probably an arm and a leg.
It's worth it, though.
It's worth it.
Completely worth it.
Yeah, but not everybody can do that.
Correct.
That's what makes it hard. Okay, coming up, a former principal and current education consultant who says schools are being rewarded financially for graduating students, not for educating them. We're going to add him to the conversation next. Justin was a middle school teacher and then a principal who saw firsthand how schools were being pressured by administrators to pass students who didn't even show up. Now, as an education consultant, he's tackling the system from a different angle and is working to make sure students leave with the skills they need.
I think the main challenges that we face in education is we have students who need a lot more support than they're getting because they're far below grade level, they don't have the reading skills or the math skills, and that makes it difficult to teach at grade level. If you're a fourth grade teacher and you have students who are reading at a kindergarten or a first grade level, you can't teach kindergarten reading skills and teach fourth grade standards. So I think we need a massive investment in intervention services for students who are well below grade level. Districts have tried to get more students to graduate despite not increasing the number of students who are actually doing the work that it takes to learn. Like, you get credit for not turning in your assignments. You pass even if you don't show up to school, all in the name of getting a graduation rate up without really changing anything. Something is up if chronically truant students are graduating. I find it frustrating that policies make it difficult for students to fail even when they don't engage with the material. When schools fudge graduation requirements, when they pass and graduate students who haven't been showing up at the expense of everyone who's earning a diploma, they are now suspect. They are now no longer believed when they present that diploma and say, I have the skills to do this job. And employers reasonably are skeptical that the diploma means anything because the school has systematically devalued it by issuing diplomas to students who weren't even there.
How is this happening?
I think it starts with accountability, that schools understandably are held accountable for certain outcomes. They're held accountable for student attendance, which they don't completely control. They're held accountable for test scores, which they have a bigger influence on, and they're held accountable for graduation rates. And I think that's where some of the fudging starts.
Okay, so having a kid in school and graduation rates, not what they actually learn. Okay, that's a problem. We're incentivizing the wrong outcome criteria, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody can be there, just check in the morning and go hang out in the hall, not necessarily learn anything, not do anything. But this clearly is not working. And you say grading and graduation rate pressures people to lower the standards so they can keep the numbers up to get their funding.
Absolutely.
we're paying for the wrong things.
Right. We want schools to achieve the outcome of getting all students to read. We want that student to graduate, but we don't want them to graduate without being able to read.
But 19% of graduates can't read. How do you graduate and you can't read?
It's a scandal. It's not acceptable. I think it happens early on. The gaps begin early in kindergarten, in first grade. And because learning builds on learning, those gaps never close. Kids don't get the support they need. Teachers don't get the support they need. And the job of catching students up becomes greater and greater with every passing year.
But we're talking about billions of dollars here that are being spent to educate kids that aren't getting educated. I mean, look at the US results versus these developed countries. And we're down at number 36 in literacy. But yet we spend more money than these other countries. We supposedly have all this technology, but yet we're 36th in the world in terms of literacy. How is that possible? We're 7th out of 37 in science. We're 25th in mathematics. Computer information, we're 5th out of 14. We're way down the list.
We are. And here's the thing. We know how to teach all children to read. This is not some mystery. This was figured out a long time ago.
Do we?
We absolutely do. And we've seen new legislation around the science of reading to make sure that all schools are using evidence-based practices so that students don't slip through the cracks. But I think what a lot of it comes down to, Dr. Phil, is support. Teachers are being asked to do this all on their own. So if you have 20 students who are below grade level, you're expected to catch them up on your own. And there is just not time in the day. Teachers need help.
They would hand me a spiral-bound book and they would walk out of my classroom and then expect me to teach it the next day. I can't read from a book and engage a 6-year-old. I have to have fun with it, right? They just expect teachers to do it all. It's like running this rat race of trying to figure it out.
There are at least 10 states that across the board have just lowered the standards. You start with a 50, right? The lowest grade a kid can get is a 50, and a 50 is passing in a lot of these states. When y'all were in school, wasn't the lowest grade a 0?
0.
I know, because I had a lot of zeros.
I think we're lowering the standards on everything, right? Like academics, of course, but we don't even have standards for behaviors. Listen to the teacher, what does that even mean? We're truly not even able to teach anymore. We're just putting out fires.
Well, and you can't suspend a student because if they go home that day, you don't have that head count and it affects your funding. So if you suspend 10 students because they got in fights or they attacked a teacher, well, then that's 10 students they don't get funding for. So these hellions stay in school and it disrupts the others who might be trying to learn. All right, we're going to talk to a woman next who has spent over 30 years fighting for education reform. She says outdated federal regulations are crippling public schools, making them more akin to factories than learning centers. We're going to meet her after the break. In times of uncertainty, stemming from economic volatility, political shifts, and global events, it's crucial to work together and unite as a country for a brighter future. Amid these challenges, it's important to take proactive steps to monitor and protect your finances and retirement accounts. That's why I'm turning to physical gold and silver to help protect my accounts, and you should too. Gold and silver prices reached record highs this year, and central banks are buying gold like never before. So get started today with Preserve Gold, the only precious metals company I trust and recommend. They have hundreds of 5-star reviews and millions of dollars in trusted transactions. Preserve Gold is giving away a free precious metals guide with information on how to help protect your accounts. Just text Dr. Phil to 50505, and you can get up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to claim this exclusive offer from Preserve Gold today. Jeanne Allen has been fighting to reform America's public education system for over 30 years. She says we are the best country with the worst education system.
Well over 70% of our kids are not reading, writing, doing civics, no history, science, at what we consider proficient. So we have a nation's report card, and we make these small little inch strides with a couple of points here and there, and that's it.
And you point at what you call the traditional factory-style model school.
It's just like your traditional factory where everything goes the way it always has in kind of down a assembly line. So you have kids in seats with the same number of desks in a building that looks relatively the same since the very beginning.
Jeanne, thanks for being here. You're a warrior. You've been fighting this for a long time. You say we are the best country with the worst education system, so that's pretty sad. Why do you think that's the case?
We're spending 3 times as much as we spent 20 years ago for fewer students getting less than half the results in a nation that is the most free and has the most progress in every other industry. I'd say that's terrible.
Well, how do you explain that? Because what you just said, that would stack up to the best results, but it doesn't. Why?
Because what you just heard here is that we have a system that's dysfunctional, in fact, it borderlines under corrupt. We spend money on districts and structures. We're basically in the real estate business, Dr. Phil. We spend money on structures, buildings, time in a classroom versus how well a student is doing. And so why are we running a 19th century factory model of education when it's the 21st century, when you can learn on the road, when you can learn from one person, when you can learn with 60 people? It doesn't have to be 20 or 2. It doesn't have to be a large school. It doesn't have to be a small school. There are so many ways to do this. We're not educating children because we have failed to learn how to actually teach and expose them to the wide variety of learning that's available in this world.
Well, here's one of the problems that I see, and this is concerning to me. In the last 19 years, you've seen students increase 7.6%, teachers increase 8.7%, but district administration increase 87.6%. We got a whole lot of people in the offices, 87.6% administrative growth. Why aren't they helping the teachers in the classrooms?
Well, and we used to say when they would come in and they would do academic days with us, we're like, please come. Like, my favorite line used to be, I love what you're saying. Could you come model that for me? And they bolt out of the room. Anytime you ask them to come into your classroom, model it, ask for the support, they'll leave.
Because they didn't ask you how to actually shape the school.
No, they're just handing it to us.
They didn't ask you what it takes to actually get to that point. What's the work you need to do? What's the school day look like? What's the school year look like?
What do your kids look like?
Schools that are run and developed by teachers and people closest to the kids are the schools that are the best for them. Schools that are focused on what that student needs, not you're going to send your child to a school because it's in the area. It's I'm going to send my child to a school because I understand that they understand how to teach my kids and they believe and value my choice to do so.
I've said this is a national emergency, and I say that because if you look at the homeless population, over 90% of those folks are not literate. And when you look at who's in prison, 43% of adults at level 1 literacy skills live in poverty. 4% that are at the top level are in poverty. So clearly education helps. 3 out of 4 food stamp recipients are at the lowest 2 levels of literacy. 90% of welfare recipients are high school dropouts. 16 to 19-year-old girls at poverty level with below average skills are 6 times more likely to have out of wedlock children than their reading counterparts. So we can see that illiteracy creates problems across the board. There's no question that if we are continuing to not educate our population and it's getting worse, not better, where are we headed?
And yet those statistics, they not only come from illiteracy, but they come from the fact that we sent those children to schools that did not focus on helping them get out of poverty, because for the longest time, we all equated lack of education with poverty. And we know because we have an increasing supply of great schools outside of traditional public education, charter schools, private schools, micro schools, hybrid, online, blended, that are educating the least advantaged, that are actually exceeding the performance of some of our more advantaged students because they are focused on those kids and what they need. They're not in the traditional bureaucracy. They're not having to report to a school board that doesn't know anything, a district that's full of all those bureaucrats, a state or a federal government that tells people what to do based on where the money flows, not on how the kids do.
Why are we still in this factory model? These classrooms today look like they did 100 years ago, but yet the entire world around the school has changed.
So let me bring you to Washington, D.C., or any of the nation's capitals where you have hundreds of organizations that grab the public money, get paid their dues or their association fees, and do nothing but lobby for the status quo. Why else would we be talking about this for almost 40 years? Because you have lobbyists, special interests, and people, as we like to call them, the blob, who do nothing but lobby for that and make parents, like mine once were, think that everything's okay, it must be your child.
What's the government role in all of this? Why are we not hearing about this? This is an absolute emergency. Where are teachers' unions in all of this? Are they helping or are they hurting? Well, guess what my opinion is? I'll tell you when we come back. Well, tonight we're tackling the alarming state of our nation's public education system. This is a crisis and it's getting worse, not better. What needs to happen here?
Well, you can't change the system. It won't help the principals, the teachers, or the parents. What you have to do is create a new supply outside the current system that kicks that system in the butt and makes them either account or go out of business. And that's exactly what's happening across the country. The students with dyslexia are going to schools focused on kids with dyslexia. And other students are coming there. Why? Because their parents said, well, if you can teach those kids to read, you can teach my kids to read. You're seeing organizations starting private schools with kids with neurodivergent disorders. You're seeing schools for kids who are back to basic, classical academies, behavioral. High expectations get and beget students that do well. And what you have to do to create that supply, give parents who are demanding it the money to follow their kids. Why on earth are we spending money on schools and districts where kids do not get educated? Money should be strapped to the back of your backpack like cash. And you should vie for the privilege of educating my child. That's how you put bad schools out of business, you put the teachers' union out of business, and you get kids educated and teachers and principals able to raise the money, earn the money to educate those kids.
I would find that a more compelling argument if these schools had a track record. But what they have a track record of doing is marketing and attracting families and skimming families from public schools, and then not a lot to show for it after that. I think we would have seen much greater shifts in the population toward that type of school. But the reality is most of what they're talking about is experimental. And the thing about experiments, I was a science teacher, the thing about experiments is they're difficult. And most of the time, you don't find something better in an experiment. So whenever we criticize the status quo, we have to realize that the good results that we're getting are coming from the status quo, as well as the bad results. And if we're going to shift to something completely different, we have to make sure that that alternative can deliver the good results that the status quo is currently delivering, as well as address the shortcomings of it.
Well, I've been in over 200 of those organizations. A couple of things to set the record straight. 75% of our students are in traditional public schools, most not by choice. Now 25%. It used to be 90-10. It is now 75-25, so there are shifts. Secondly, they're public, they're private, they're charter, they're rural, they're urban, and there's an incredible track record. And I would bank on a parent's decision and where their child's getting educated, then I would bank on a bureaucratic assessment.
Would you consider going back to a school if it was innovative and move the needle educationally?
It depends, right? So we're kind of in a phase of our life where we want to spend as much time with our kids. So putting them in a school and then having them sit there all day and then just getting a couple hours with them. So it's kind of twofold for us is we want them to have a great education, but I also want to see them grow, right? And we become best friends with them. know each other on a much deeper level.
Yeah, but it's not all about you. You got to remember that there are experiences that the children need to have socially and developmentally and competitively that you have to make sure you're providing that for them as well.
Which is where the community comes in.
Right.
So the entire homeschooling, world schooling community, when we RV, when we travel, that's the first thing we do is find who's in the area. But we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that just travel full time. We meet each other in different parts of the world and do these activities, do these social events, do
Yeah,
these
that's
events.
important. They're still able to be on teams and do things like that. That's
Absolutely.
The microschool movement across the country is doing just that. They're providing hybrid opportunities for students. They get to create their own journey sometimes. It's project-based, and then there are times when there's the actual kind of direct instruction, and you have more and more parents, particularly single moms, creating schools like this so that they can actually meet their needs, as well as people who want the ability to pull their kids out and travel. And the money in some states follows those students to that school, making this possible, because it just can't be one size. It has to be a variety of options.
Of course. The teacher shortage in America is reaching crisis levels. Educators are overworked, underpaid, and walking away from the profession in record numbers. But when schools can't find qualified teachers to fill classrooms, it's students who are paying the price. We're going to talk about that next. No matter what teachers do, kids go home. And when you look at underperformance among U.S. students, there are some common denominators: socioeconomic disparities, family socioeconomic status, household structure, cognitive home environment factors, and the long-term impacts of socioeconomic status. So that's what we're up against sometimes. You can have great teachers, and if you go home to a home that's in a low socioeconomic strata and they don't have internet, they don't have devices at home, they don't have Wi-Fi where they can follow up and do assignments, maybe those parents don't value education, maybe they're both working, not there to supervise children. It's hard. It makes it more difficult. And then with teachers, the shortages that we're looking at, there's 314,134 positions unfilled or occupied by uncertified teachers. That's 10% of all positions. So there's a problem. Unions aren't helping in this situation, are they?
No, because unions advocate now for operational and contractual things. Yes, they try to level set salaries. That was their goal. But unfortunately, those salaries don't go to teachers who are doing better. They go to teachers based on how long they've been in the classroom. But the root causes, according to all the studies from Harvard to Stanford to lots of different organizations and data collectors, the root cause of teacher retention issues is the satisfaction, the fact that teachers have zero control over their classroom. They could make more money if we actually reduce the amount of administrators, and we should be giving them a boost. But they should be brought in because they know something, not because they passed courses in college. If we don't put teachers in front of our students that know math, that know reading, that love history, or that are able to learn and expose their students, no matter what we do contractually, we're not going to fix those kids' education.
Yeah, that's for absolute certain. And what I say to all of you is you need to start asking questions and not make assumptions about what's happening at school. You need to find out, what does this grade mean? What are the proficiencies that my child actually has? Is my child being challenged, or is my child just being pushed along, maybe because they're a good kid? Don't assume your child is being educated because you see a report card. Find out whether that child is actually getting educated. Because I'm telling you, when you hear me say 30% of eighth graders can't read at a basic level, that's a third of the class. So have your child look to their left and look to their right. One of those three can't read. Is it your child? You need to know the answer to these questions. This is getting worse, not better. You've seen what the results are, and this is affecting all of us. And if we want to have a country that is healthy and competitive and successful, we need to fix this problem. And it's going to take all of us. And it's going to take us making noise and demanding better. And one of the big questions I have is, are we even teaching the right things for the 2020s?
And Dr. Phil, can I just say also, we talked about the troublemakers, those kids. Oftentimes those troublemakers just aren't being taught properly, or they've not been diagnosed. And I don't mean with a condition. Maybe they actually need to be more challenged. Maybe there's something that's not clicking in terms of reading. If you look school by school at some of the data, you find that those students are usually the ones that had the most promise, but there wasn't an environment to let them go outside more, to let them have recess, to let them stand up and shine in what they need to do. That's why we need environments that are tailored to the needs of those kids personally, that parents are engaged in helping choose.
I think this is why teachers are so overwhelmed, because we know it, we see it, we want to meet those students' needs. And I think an incredibly important question that we can ask as parents to the teachers, as the community, is, how can I help? Just having a parent come in and staple some packets, right? Like, my time, I don't need to be stapling packets. And just bringing the community together, I think, can help us tremendously.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for being here. I want to thank Samantha, Mark, Val, Justin, and Jeannie for being here tonight. And thank you at home for finding us here on Merit TV. You can pick up my book, We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity, everywhere books are sold. Tell all your friends that it's easy to find Merit TV. All you need to do is download our Merit app by going to Apple App or Google Play. It's just that simple. And don't forget to check out the all-new Dr. Phil podcast, where you get your daily access to Dr. Phil Primetime, along with weekly episodes where I deliver unfiltered, powerful insights and practical tools to help you navigate today's complex world. Download, subscribe, and follow. Listen to the Dr. Phil podcast for free on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for being here.